So let's get started. Welcome to today's class, Tuesday. We are going to start looking at radio management now, okay? Which will also a section that we'll get to, not today, but in next week's class will be with regards to the question on your assignment, okay? But this will also help you. So what we're going to look at is the differences, the different roles in radio, what they all entail, who looks after what, etc., so that you can have a broad idea about what everything looks like and how it all comes together at the end of the day. Okay. I'm aware that you don't necessarily have this managing radio textbook, so I will send this to you. Okay, the pages, there's not that much of a difference in between the next level radio textbook and the managing radio as to the roles and what they entail, but the managing radio looks at it from a UK perspective more, where obviously next level radio looks at it from a South African point of view. Employment has changed a lot, right, over the last 20 years. Think about what's happened over the last 20 years, since 2003 until now. I was pretty much graduating matric versus now we've got AI and augmented reality and all these things. The landscape itself has changed. TV has evolved. Streaming has come out and kind of taken over. When I was still in school, we would still rent videos and DVDs and things like that. Okay, so it's been a massive change into how things are. We would have to wait a week for a new episode of a series to come out versus now you can watch 5 seasons of the stuff if you really want to binge watch, for instance. Okay, so big shifts in the overall dynamics of the media industry as a whole. There's been an introduction of a lot of new technologies for things like production and control, and these have all helped us with regards to radio management. So managers are now expecting our employees to be multi-skilled and flexible. When I talk about multitasking here, it's not just in the sense of able to do different types of things at the same time. It's more referring to multi-skilling. So it's no longer jack of all trades, master of none. Okay, we want you to be a jack of all trades. We want you to understand how the different areas in a business function together, whether it's that you are an, I don't know, HR manager that needs to understand how all the core functions of your employees work, whether it's that you're a presenter who needs to understand how to produce things, how to read news, for instance, how sales and marketing works, etc., or whether you're a program manager that needs to understand all the different functions and everything that falls underneath you, like as part of your role. Okay, so you need to be multi-skilled, skilled in different facets of the radio industry, for instance, or actually any industry in the world at the moment. It helps you if you are multi-skilled. So it's been identified as a core skill by industry training body, and in practice, most people prefer to be involved across a radio station and not just having one specialist role anymore. Because you pick up skills along the way that can help you on your CV and help you with your next role wherever you're going to go. So the boundaries between, however, specific different production roles have become very blurred and require quite a in-depth understanding and in-depth nature of the production, because you get 3 different types of producers, for example, and they have become more blurred. So it used to be that we know you are either a content producer or an administrative producer or a audio producer, okay? But nowadays, you don't have to simply be one of them. I can have a content and an administrative producer can have the same role, can fulfill the same roles at the end of the day. Audio producer is still an audio producer. So that one, it's not really as blurred. But when it comes to the other types of producers. Also, an audio producer can do, for example, content production. So the lines have become very blurred when it comes to that. So before we carry on, I want to show you some organograms so that you can have an idea in your head of the typical breakdown of the different types of radio stations. Okay, so the first one here is not a South African radio station, but it'll give you a good overview. So commercial radio stations, we know, have a board of directors, okay? And someone needs to talk to this board of directors at the end of the day, and that will be the managing director. So in South African radio stations, this will be referred to as either a general manager or a station manager, okay? It could be, so if you hear station manager or general manager, it's the exact same thing as being an MD. You run everything, okay? So then you can have a head of program, for instance, here, head of business development and resources, marketing manager, the head of traffic. We're going to chat about this. Traffic is not the sense of a car, as you might think. It's in terms of advertising. You place advertising, and that is called the traffic with regards to the layout. You will have an account manager who manages, let's say, Sasco or Nike or whoever it might be. Admin managers, HR, head of IT, for instance, head of engineering if you have an on-site engineer. Okay, so head of programming would be our program manager, and that's broken down into news, presenters, production manager that might have a production assistant, your overall presenters and anchors. Community radio stations tend to have a head of presenters. It's not really something you find in a commercial radio space, but your news obviously broken down into reporters, presenters, anchors. Okay, so there's a lot of other roles, again, that gets taken up here in this space. Then under marketing manager, you will have marketing executives to assist you. You can have PR in here, you can have a designer in here, etc. Head of traffic can have traffic officers. I know, again, it's confusing, but again, we also can call them a scheduling assistant or the scheduler, okay? Or it can look as such. Again, general manager, okay, same as, like I said here, same as a managing director. Then the rest of your managers, it could be programming, you could have a news editor, it could be sales, admin and finance, engineering. So just so that you're aware, majority of radio stations do not have an on-site engineer. They might have one engineer looking after a couple of radio stations, or you outsource it because the function has changed so much and so much has gone digital. There's not enough analog, like physical, actual equipment always on site that I need someone to be a permanent employee of mine, okay? So you, it can then split again. So you, under programming, you will have an executive programmer, for instance, or producers, reporters, presenters. You can have camera crew, like for instance, the SABC has a camera crew. Under news, you can have an assignment editor, etc. Okay. So here on the right-hand side, this is an example of an actual South African radio station. It's XKFM, the SABC community radio station in the Eastern Cape. And their mission is specifically to preserve the Shun and the Cree languages and cultures and uplift, develop, and inform the community, okay, about this culture. So how's this thing set up? We have an SABC board. We know that. Then we have a group CEO. For instance, MultiChoice also has a board and a group CEO, and then they have a CFO and everything else. But the group CEO will have a company secretary and an internal audit team. Then it's broken down here, like you can see, okay? Legal services and regulation affairs. So they have legal department, an office of the GCEO and regions. So different regions have different people looking after it. Chief Operating Officer, Chief Technology Officer, Chief People Officer, Chief Financial Officer, GE for News, and GE for Commercial Enterprises, who has a head of audience services. Okay, so that's how that's broken up. Under the regions, if we look at the breakdown of the regions, you have a head of group communications, a head of strategy and risk management, head of procurement, so hiring new people. Under Chief Operating Officer, there is a GE for Content Enterprises, for PCS, so the public commercial stations, and a GE for public broadcasting stations, so PBS radio. And then here you can see it goes to the head of the PBS for radio. Chief People Officer, you have a GE for corporate affairs and G for human capitals. So then from here, under head of radio, here it will be broken down into the actual radio stations. Okay, so the different radio stations will each have a different station manager who looks after the radio station, different program manager, but they don't have a separate sales manager because they have an overall sales structure. Okay, that is across the whole South Africa. And that helps assist by selling advertising on both radio and TV. Same with the commercial radio stations. There's one person that looks after the community radio stations, but each community radio station in essence again has a station manager, a program manager, someone who's in charge of the music, and it keeps breaking down from there. Okay, so this is their top breakdown, and then from here it breaks down into kind of like this, and from here similar thing. Okay, it breaks down or might even look more like this. Okay, so this is just a couple of organograms to give you an idea of how a radio station's overall structure looks, so how it might come in. So when it comes to a community radio station specifically, community radio stations function a bit differently. They do not have like shareholders that they talk to or that they have to give feedback to, but they do have a board of directors. Okay, every single radio station, community radio station rather, has to have a board of directors. And what is really important in a community radio station is personal development overall. Okay, whether it's in radio or in management, both of these, training, skills and development is a big part of it. And it's become a focus point as of late. So community radio stations provide a really valuable training ground for would-be commercial radio managers, commercial presenters, program managers, whatever it might be. Okay. Why? Because you start out, majority of people tend to start at a community radio station. You don't get paid, but you get skilled, you get trained in all the different facets of radio. Okay, I myself started in, campus radio station, actually. When I was 16, I joined UCT radio station and worked at MFM, a radio station in Stellenbosch. Those are the two community radio stations that I was at. And you do get a lot of skills, all right, even though you don't get paid. So that's the only thing, is there's no money involved, but there's a very big training culture. And there's always been this kind of debate about whether commercial radio stations should be giving community radio stations some sort of a fund or money for the fact that they are taking their talent. Because I train them for 4 or 5 years, whatever it might be, and then you take them and put them on your show because now they're good and ready to be put on that show. And obviously they want the money, so they will move. So there's this certain way that it's perceived that community radio stations churn out the talent, they create them, and then the commercial radio stations kind of pick them up from there. Anyway, so community radio stations have always been a training ground. Okay, it's always been like that and always been a springboard to work in either the, for instance, the SABC, whether it's PCS or PBS, and the other privately owned commercial radio stations. In the case of your managing radio textbook, they talk about BBC, which is the public broadcaster in the UK, right? BBC. So in community radio, volunteers come to the radio station with their diverse range of skill sets that they have, that we can use, obviously, as a radio station, and we train them in other skill sets. Community stations are very unique in their ability to attract volunteers. Okay, people come to do this for free. Depending on how good the community radio station is, they have a waiting list of people who really, really want to form part of the station. And they create alliances with people who have a very wide range of skills and professional experience. They will exchange goods and services in exchange for airtime if they don't have enough money. So trade exchanges is very popular in community radio stations, because I might not have the money to pay you for a product if I need something, but I can do a trade exchange with you and give you airtime to that value, or times 2 or 3 or whatever it is for this product. So what's been happening is that from a production point of view, the independent production sector is growing rapidly, even though the progress hasn't been so big in the last couple of years, okay? But if you look at South Africa in terms of production, whether it's a production house that produces audio content, or whether it's a production house that does visual content. So perhaps, so there's a lot of these, like there's a place called The Station, there's Cheeky Media, there's a lot of these houses that produce different types of elements. Some of them produce simply like banners for TV or stings for TV, or others produce these things for radio stations, etc. Okay, so independent producers range from multinational commercial giants. You get huge independent producing companies, or you get these one-person companies where it's just one person that's producing certain elements that they sell to you. Okay. Essentially, independent producers manage the whole production process, delivering a program for an agreed price. So everything from scripting, copywriting, finding the voice for the voiceover, putting the whole thing together, having the voiceover obviously record this thing, editing the whole thing, and then producing said segment at the end of the day. So increasingly, independent producers are able to run their own internet radio stations and podcasts as well, okay, because we have multiple skill sets. So I might be a producer, but along the way, I learn a lot of other skill sets that are enabling me to, if I really wanted to, run an independent radio service, or rather an internet radio service, okay, an online-based radio service, or a podcast, where I can teach you about these skill sets, or if I have another niche skill set, I can bring that forth as well, okay? Increasingly, we're finding that, for example, Media 24 was looking for content producers specifically for podcasts. So podcast content producers. So that's another role that we find is starting to increase, which we didn't have, okay, a couple of years back even. So these people are independent of the established broadcasting hierarchy, don't need to form part of a radio station or a TV station. And the commercial sector is starting to recognize the benefit of these independent production houses. I find that I work with a few of them on a day-to-day basis. So currently, we are getting ready to do a couple of segments on ETV and on SABC2, and we are not using the internal company to provide the produced material to us. Okay, we're using independent companies to create the products for us to use on air or on TV in this case, and we're using a separate production house to create the content for the radio station. Okay, so different roles and functions popping up all over the place. So going back a few years, in 2007, independent productions were responsible for almost a quarter of the 110 Sony nominations and 6 out of the BBC's 20 Gold Awards. It's just gone up from there, okay? And the BBC itself has a minimum proportion of network output that has to be independent productions. At this point, it was 10%. It's more now, and that was determined by the BBC Trust. So the BBC has a system of commissioners that they can select from, which are both in-house producers and independent production companies. So what they do is they brief both, and they see what these guys come up with at the end of the day, and then they choose the best one and give it to them, which I don't always feel necessarily is fair, because you've gone through the trouble of doing a lot of work and prep for this thing. But anyway, so they have this way that they do it to see who's the most creative that they give it to. So if we look at typical management roles within a radio station, like I said, you get so many different managers, but it's going to vary from station to station, okay? Even within the same group, one person might have a talent manager and another radio station might not, okay? So in the UK, they speak about a person called a managing editor, and they have the overall responsibility for a BBC local radio station. So let's say a community radio station. So for instance, XKFM is a local SABC-based community radio station. Okay, so imagine that XK station manager in this case is called a managing editor, while the equivalent post in a commercial radio station is referred to as a managing director. Okay, the MD. So same person, just from a commercial point of view versus BBC local radio station. Okay, so MD, station manager, general manager, managing editor. In this case, same person. Okay. So many community radio stations are under the day-to-day control of a station manager. Okay, here our word comes in. In smaller operations, an individual may cover a number of functions which would be separate in a larger organization. So if you are a small community radio station, technically we pay our managerial staff in community radio stations. So I might not be able to afford 5 managers, but I might be able to pay 3. So I might only have a station manager who might also function as an operations manager. I might have a programming manager and, for instance, a sales manager who will also function as the marketing manager, for instance. Okay. Where in a commercial radio station, these are split. So the managing director or the station manager or the managing editor may also present a radio program. Some community radio stations, that happens, that the station manager or the program manager also does a program on air. Okay, even with PBS radio stations, that happens sometimes. Like in the case of RSG, the station manager used to also host a show on a Sunday, and she runs the overall day-to-day of this radio station. You get some people who also sell advertising at their own time. So for instance, if I'm a producer, I get X as a salary and I'd like to make more profit. So I go out and I try to sell my show, for instance, okay? Or just the radio station as a whole. And I might have my own list of key clients, and make more money out of it. Okay. So the first one I want to start talking about is a program, or is programs rather. If we look at programs, programming is quite a big function. There's a lot that falls under a program manager. So anything in essence that relates to on-air content falls under programs or programming. Okay, so whether it is a content creator, whether you are a presenter, whether you're a producer, whether you read the news, whether you are a journalist, an editor, whether you are a, what else? The talent manager, whatever it is, okay? Anything that's got to do with our product, and in a radio station, their product is the airtime. So anything that's got to do with airtime will fall under the programs manager, okay? Anything that's got to do with ad space that I sell will fall under sales. So that's not under the same thing or same umbrella. So the program section might fall under the control of a program controller, as they call it in the UK. We refer to it as a program manager. And this department includes all programming, production, and presentation staff, or presenters and freelance presenters, everyone, okay? The head of the department can also be referred to as a program director, the head of programs, and don't get confused here, a station manager. Okay, in South Africa, we refer to this person as a program manager, but in the UK, a program manager could be a station manager, because the actual station manager could be, where is it now? Could be a managing editor, or it could be a managing director, okay? So something different. So station manager in the UK isn't a station manager as we know it, it's a programming manager. So in BBC local radio, this is part of the role of, again, a new name, a managing editor, okay? Supported by 1 or 2 assistant editors. So in radio, the one thing you'll pick up is there are so many different names for the same person. Just like an advert can be referred to as, for instance, a spot or generic airtime. Same thing, okay? So you don't need to understand all the terminologies as long as you understand the roles that this person has within this function. So only on very large radio stations will a producer be responsible for the actual production of an individual show. So in South Africa, you might have a producer on, for instance, the breakfast and the afternoon drive shows, because this is where the majority of my money gets made. So I need to invest more on all spheres, not just from a capital side, to make sure that this show does the best, okay? The most money comes in a commercial breakfast show. So if a commercial breakfast show flops, then the station is in trouble. So we spend money on people to hire for this specific show, one of which will be a producer. Okay, so we get a team together to help. But that's normally, like I said, only in the big radio stations. So in South Africa, commercial radio stations. And in the PCS radio stations also have them, and some of the PBS stations also. So in some cases, the breakfast show might be produced by a team of people, including a producer, presenters, production assistant, even a content creator. But elsewhere on the schedule, let's say someone doing a lunch show, the presenter will be expected to prepare, produce, and present the show on their own. So what community radio station teaches you is exactly this. It teaches you how to prepare your content, how to produce content, and how to present your show as one person instead of having a whole team backing you and helping you. Okay. So a number of roles have developed which control certain elements of programming across our schedule. Schedule refers to the day-to-day programming of 24 hours. So for example, we have a head of music, and this person on its own can again have various other names, and they might be responsible not only for the station's overall music policy and playlist, but also using specialist scheduling software for selecting certain individual tracks to be played in the show. So don't worry too much about this. This will still be explained to you. What it comes down to is that every radio station has software that they use. This software is intelligent enough to pick up from the rules that I've inserted what song needs to be played where, so that you don't hear the same songs run over and over and over again on the same time on the like every single day, for instance. Okay, there's software to help us do all of this. Others might prepare, for example, community or what's on information or promotions of competitions, things that can be used in all the shows. Okay, but in all but the largest radio stations, these roles will be added to the duties of a regular presenter. Let me just do this. I don't know why there's a double there. So these things, for example, any information about your show, okay, you will have to do yourself on majority of the radio stations, unless you have a producer that does these things for you. So presenters are responsible for adapting their material for other streams, for instance, for websites and for podcasts, for video services, social media, etc. Okay. The department usually includes news and sport preparation and presentation under the control of a news editor or head of news. In South Africa, we refer to it as a news editor. And in South Africa, a head of music will be the music compiler. Okay, so again, a different name there for what these people do. So overall, the program controller, program manager, is responsible for all the elements which contribute to you as a listener, your listening experience, including news and information coverage, music scheduling, etc. Anything that's got to do with your listening experience, except for the actual adverts, okay? So you're also responsible for doing the station imaging production. So what does that mean? Imaging refers to any pre-produced audio segment, okay? Anything, whether it's a jingle, aka a sound that brands the radio station. So it could be saying the station's name. It could be a segment that gives me your WhatsApp line number, whatever it might be. It could be a show intro. It could be a news jingle, again, that we're a jingle. So imaging refers to the sound of the station. It's part of your overall brand as a radio station, okay? Your sound fits in with your brand, and that imaging needs to be created by someone. And normally we have a production team or a producer who will assist us with this, but it falls under the programming department, okay, under the program manager. Some places outsource it and have other people do it for them, okay? And any elements of station marketing which doesn't fall part of sales will also fall part of it. So if we are doing a big campaign as a radio station and I want certain pieces of audio produced, it'll fall under me as the programming manager, not under sales, okay? Could fall under marketing as well, but at the end of the day, it needs to come through me as the programming manager to say, cool, yes, this fits within our sound for me to continue doing this. Then we have a sales department. So in a commercial radio station, the sales manager or the sales director is the person responsible to bring in money, right? From ads. So commercials are also referred to as, well, adverts, or adverts are also referred to as commercials, sponsorships, and co-promotions. There will be a whole department for commercial production and sales promotions and sales traffic, that word traffic again. That means scheduling the adverts on a day-to-day basis, okay? So traffic, not driving around. Traffic on a radio station refers to my ad space. How much space do I have? How many slots do I have open? Am I full, aka stuck in traffic? Are there slots open that I can use? Okay, so traffic scheduler or sales traffic, same thing. It's the person that schedules the adverts on the radio station. So in most commercial radio stations, the majority of employees working in sales okay, need to rephrase that. So majority of the people who work in a commercial radio station do sales. Okay, that's what they do. There's a big team of salespeople normally that go out and sell. That's what they do every single day. Okay, whole day, whole night. In the SABC, the sales structure is a bit different. So you have your regional manager, and you might sell for that specific region. So, for instance, in the Western Cape, you might sell for Umhlobo Wenene or whatever. In KZN, you might sell for Ukhozi FM, right? And every other radio station that falls within that area. Or you can sell for a specific brand. So you are the salesperson that looks after Adidas. So if anything about Adidas comes through, it needs to come through you because you look after that specific brand. Okay, so it's your brand. So there are a lot of different ways that sales can be structured depending on how big a radio station is. Normally, they also have someone separate. If it's a small company who wants to come and advertise, there might be one person who deals with that. Okay, so local advertising, for instance, or regional advertising from company itself. In the case of a community radio station, however, you don't have that luxury. You don't have so many members that can go out and sell for you at different places. So technically, some only have one. Okay, some have 2 or 3 people that sells for them. So different structures. So advertising sales are undertaken normally in a commercial radio sphere by sales executives, as we call them. Specific individuals may be tasked with selling sponsorships only or promotion opportunities. So the sales team is often supported by a dedicated administrator to help with the actual admin, because salespeople and admin not that great. Same as creatives and admin not that great. Okay. They also work completely differently to programming. So if you're a presenter, you know that you have 3 hours of your show per day, and you will invoice as an ISP at the end of the day. That's what you owe me. So for me, I care about the content. From a sales perspective, however, I tend not to make a big basis salary, but I can earn really great commission. I've known people who make more money as a sales person than the station manager did, simply through being a really, really good salesperson. So salespeople care about the money. That's it. Okay. Yes, I care about my clients. So I do want the client's content to be good. But on the end of the day, I sell first and foremost. I want my commission the following month. So I look at how much have I sold this month. So how much do I need to sell now next month to make targets and to start earning or getting my commission up, etc., etc. Smaller stations usually find that it's not so cost effective to maintain their own in-house commercial production departments. Okay. Why? Because there's just not enough productions that's required by them to do, okay, to cover the cost of a dedicated studio and a copywriter and a producer and an engineer. So these ads will then be scripted and produced by specialist external companies. Some community radio stations, however, do have, like, for instance, a second studio which can double up as a production studio for certain produce products or ads or whatever it might be, because they try and make additional income through doing this. So some community radio stations will teach you the skills in order to be, for instance, a voiceover artist or a copywriter or a producer or whatever else, an engineer, and yeah, pretty much it. In order for them to make extra cash, but also for you as that presenter to make extra money on the side, okay? It's not a lot, but you can learn from it and use it. But also they won't make commercials for, and in this case, commercials being adverts for large companies, like for instance, Vodacom, okay? Vodacom has a specialist external company that does it for them. So they will just send the advert already made to the radio station, where smaller, more local companies might ask you to produce something for them. We also use these kind of production studios for promotions. So if I have a competition on my show next week, I then will use my voice to record a promotion to tell you that next week you need to listen to my show because we're going to be doing X, Y, Z. Whatever it might be that we are doing, okay? So similarly, scheduling the transmission of adverts is a crucially important task, and on a large commercial radio station, it can become complex. So I've once had an ad play out on, let me not say the radio station name, on a South African public broadcaster, and right after our advert was played, our competitor's ad was played. And that should not happen under any circumstances, okay? That's why you have someone that schedules the adverts to make sure that competitors can't clash. You cannot have, let's say, McDonald's and KFC in the same ad break. They have to be split into different times that they will play, because they are competitors, right? So there's a lot of implications when something like this happens. So one or two staff members, normally we call them the traffic department, again, not the car traffic department that we all hate, the scheduling traffic department. So the people who will take your adverts and go and place it in a certain time on air to be heard. And these guys will be responsible to the sales manager for the specific work. So we have one person who will schedule the music every day and look after the music log, as we refer to it. And then we have one person who will look after the traffic. So scheduling the traffic, aka the adverts every day. Okay. So when it comes to engineering, like I said, these days, station engineers, we don't really have them on board anymore, or we might have one that might look after like 4 or 5 or 6 radio stations. And they spend most of their time looking at IT things and working from an IT point of view and software issues, and less on actual equipment, so analog equipment, because we've gone digital, majority of it, okay? So there's no longer a need for every single radio station to have a resident engineer. Within large radio groups, one engineer might be responsible for the maintenance across a number of radio stations, including things like installing new facilities and being on call for emergencies. So it might be a ISP, so I might have a month-to-month contract where certain hours are allocated to me as a radio station, or you might be a freelancer and I call on you as and when needed. Okay. So the engineering department is usually responsible for the provision of things like internet services and websites, although this would be delegated to a separate team of IT specialists within a group. So some radio stations even have a separate, so they have an IT specialist on retainer, but they also have a studio engineer on retainer. Studio engineer can build a whole studio for you. They can fix your transmitter. They can do your outside broadcast for you, all that jazz. And the IT specialist will work with anything related to software and the computers, yeah, from that point of view. So the station engineer will do the transmitter engineering also if you're not using Centec, which is our broad transmission company in South Africa, the transmission broadcaster. Okay, so if you don't use Centec, you can have a transmitted engineer who is specialized, because this is a specialized area, and often contracted to a couple of broadcast transmission suppliers. So I know of one company called Blue Cal, who is a transmitter engineering company, but they do things throughout Africa, not just South Africa. Okay, so they do work in other parts of Africa as well, where they build studios, they help with transmission services and anything else that you require them to help with. So a simple low power transmitter for one radio station can be maintained by a local engineer. Okay, it's simple enough that they can do it. It's not that difficult. I've had to climb on roofs myself to figure out why a transmitter isn't working. Not my best days, but I've been there. So in the case where a radio station will operate without continuous technical support on site, the station manager needs to have enough technical understanding to oversee these outside suppliers effectively, okay? So when you're a station manager, you technically need to understand how absolutely every single thing in that radio station functions, how it all comes together at the end of the day, how the puzzle pieces fit in, okay? So you shouldn't be looking at someone going, I have no idea what they're doing, okay? You should have a very good idea, understanding, even though you don't necessarily have to be an engineer, obviously, yourself, but you need to understand where HR fits in, where a technician might fit in or an engineer might fit in, where the traffic scheduler fits in, okay? The programs, understand the software that IT has to update and how it works, etc. Okay, so broad understanding, so multi-skilled once again. So it's easy to forget that most radio stations, even those within a large group, must conduct themselves like any other individual commercial company. So what happens here is at a small radio station, you might have a head of administration who will be responsible for any personal matters, accounting, bookkeeping, invoicing, general secretarial support, not necessarily office cleaning, but building maintenance and security. Okay, so normally there's one admin person that does all of this stuff if it's not broken into operations and admin. But in a larger company, you will have people who will specialize in accounting. You will have a finance department, okay, who looks after it. You will have a human resource department. Even nowadays, within, human resource will fall under employment relations. So you will have employment relations, and under them you have human resources. And within this whole thing, you will even have wellness specialists now to look after your staff. Okay, so it's been broadened quite a bit. And these people don't have to have any sort of media background. Okay, that's not what they do there. These sections, whether it's an administrator or finance or HR or ER, they are trained and experienced in a certain field, and there's a lot of them available, okay? So it's not the same as having certain unique broadcasting skills, okay, or skill set for a radio station. I mean, administrators are plenty out there. There's always people in these kind of fields that you can try and get in from a staff point of view. But the station manager, you can't. Okay? It's not as easy as that. So station managers can come from a lot of different places. It could be someone who's been a CEO or an MD at a company for a few years, someone who comes from a sales background, someone who was once a presenter or a producer for, let's say, a breakfast show, or something similar, perhaps a marketing manager. So what has happened at, for instance, 5FM previously is that they had a marketing manager, okay, who went on to become Coca-Cola's marketing manager, came back to 5FM as the station manager, and is now the marketing manager at Nando's, okay? So you can see how these people can jump in roles, but still having that specific background in media overall. So the various department heads all report to the station manager or the managing editor or managing director, however you want to call them, who will then answer to the board of directors or group management or a management committee for the day-to-day running of the organization. So under a station manager, you get programming, sales, and marketing. So often in a community radio station, the station manager might double as another department head. So for instance, being the sales manager also, or the programming controller / programming manager and the managing director. So we use whatever skills and talent you have at a community level to try and cost save, right? So the overall station management often takes responsibility for other matters which fall in both programming and sales, things like station marketing and PR specifically. I've known a lot of community radio station managers who did the PR for the station as well, and will usually be responsible for maintaining good relations with outside bodies, whether it's your local government, local authorities, major sponsors, industry bodies and regulators like ICASA or the NAB or whoever else it might be, okay? So most importantly, though, the station manager is responsible for the efficiency, the morale of the whole team. So to be a leader, to develop an overall vision, brand values, and a corporate culture for people. Very important role to function. No two radio stations will ever be structured exactly the same, even if they carry this, even if they both fall under the same umbrella company. So for instance, KFM and 947 fall under the same umbrella company. They're not structured the same way, okay? The effective manager needs to modify the structure to make the most of the skills and talent that they have available locally. So it's not just about, I'm promoting you to a manager because you have been doing this work for the last 5 years and this is now the logical next step. It's about looking at you and looking at your strengths, looking at where you excel, what type of role is best for you specifically to utilize. Okay. So in community radio, where many of these tasks are taken on by volunteers, the station manager might be the only paid member of the station, or like I said, it might be a station manager and whatever other managers you might have. And then you get consultants. Consultants are someone that we bring in for a specific reason. We won't just have a consultant just because we think we're being fancy, okay? So for instance, if suddenly there's a continuation of a loss of audience, so if I'm losing RAMs, my radio audience measurements, aka losing listeners, or I'm not bringing in enough money, things can change very quickly within a radio station, okay? So a good consultant, well briefed, can achieve a great deal by bringing additional expertise, new ideas, and a clear head, unbiased, cool objectivity to a station situation. Often only an outside person has the objectivity and that lack of personal involvement in the history of the station that they need to analyze the current position and impartiality, especially if it's a case of, I need a new breakfast presenter. So we might be loyal to this person, so we don't want to get someone new in. So a consultant can be very helpful here. Some consultants are small companies, often effectively one person specializing in either one particular field, whether it's programming or music or transmission planning or studio design, research analysis, presentation skills, voice coaching, sales, management training, whatever it is, okay? Others, though, offer pretty much anything related to radio under one roof, including everything needed for a successful license application or station launch. So they will assist you with everything from A to Z. So when it comes to consultants, an article in the Harvard Business Review set out 8 fundamental objectives for effective management consulting. And these are, number 1, responsible to a client's request for information. Okay, so you get your information. Number 2, you need to provide solutions to a specific problem. Number 3, make a diagnosis, which involves a redefinition of the problem. So now you go back to the problem, you make a diagnosis of that, you redefine the program, you make recommendations based on your diagnosis, you assist with the implementations of these recommended changes, you build a consensus and a commitment from the overall staff, you facilitate client learning through this experience, and you enhance the overall organizational effectiveness. So what's important to note here, though, is before a station should spend money on a consultant, it's crucial that all members of the management team accept that they have a problem. Doesn't help that the station manager says there's a problem, but the program manager says there isn't, or vice versa. And they also need to agree that the station can't solve this on their own internally, and that an outside objective is needed. Okay, so we need someone else from the outside who's a specialist to come and help us find a solution to our problem. The consultant should never be used as a referee to resolve internal conflict, whether it's between a manager and a presenter, or between managers themselves, whatever it is. That's not their job. They're not there to like babysit what's going on or to sort out your internal conflict issues. That's why you should have HR or other someone else, even if it's your admin person that deals with this kind of stuff. Someone else should be resolving the internal conflicts. You as a consultant are there to fix a problem, okay, not to fix problems within presenters not getting along. That's where we're going to leave it for today. And we'll continue in class next week, Monday. Any questions for me?
No questions, ma'am.
Right, cool. So then have a good rest of your week, and I shall see you in person next week.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Bye.